Out of every game I've reviewed, no other game has conflicted me as much as Nicktoons Unite. There are things I love, things I hate, and things that confuse me to no end. What are those things? Well, let's talk about it. But before I get to the things that conflict me, let's talk about the thing that I think is absolutely perfect. The characters. The playable characters of this game consist of SpongeBob SquarePants, Danny Phantom, Timmy Turner from the Fairly OddParents, and finally, Jimmy Neutron. Seeing these characters interact with each other is easily the best part of this game.
Fascinating! This looks like ghost hunting technology. Did you make these devices yourself?
No, the Fenton family are the ghost technology wizards, not me.
Wow, this is Bikini Bottom? I can't believe we're under the sea.
Everyone keep chewing your neutronic air gum. It'll let you breathe in this environment.
I can't wait to introduce you to all my friends. There's Patrick and Squidward and Mr.
SpongeBob, where is everybody?
Now that you mention it, it is a bit quiet. Too quiet.
The characters are written to be in line with their TV counterparts, the only exception being Danny, who I feel is portrayed to be more responsible here. But I can forgive this, as the team needs someone who can act as the level-headed leader. Another thing that as a 2000s Nick fanboy gets me excited is continuity. You see, before this game had come out, the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour had premiered, and here, Jimmy and Timmy already know each other. Speaking of those, I love how the plot feels straight out of one of those crossovers, which would normally be a bad thing, but here, it's a great thing. The plot is that Professor Calaminus from Jimmy Neutron has recruited Crocker from Fairly OddParents, Vlad from Danny Phantom, and Plankton from SpongeBob SquarePants. They form the Evil Syndicate and plan on conquering all of their respective worlds. This feels like it would have fit in perfectly if they had made this into a TV special. Which they totally should have, by the way. But overall, the writing, characters, and story are easily the best part of the game. Even the side characters, as few of them as there are, work wonderfully when they show up. Like Patrick, who shows up and maybe has the best comedic moment in the game. Besides those things though, every other aspect of the game has a downside in one way or another. For example, you know how I was just praising those cutscene interactions just a second ago? You'll notice I wasn't praising the cutscenes themselves, because frankly, they're just bad. Look at Jimmy here in the cutscene. He's repeating the same animation over and over again. Timmy too. He just keeps looking from left to right. It distracts from the cutscene. But that's not the worst part of said cutscenes. That would be Timmy. Now it's not the character itself, it's his character model. While the rest of the character models look fine, Timmy is easily the worst looking in my eyes. It mainly comes down to his facial expressions in the cutscenes. I mean, it just looks off. Especially since, aside from Jimmy, all of the respective shows are 2D. So if they turned out fine, what happened to Timmy? Unfortunately, my complaints don't stop there. The audio of the game is a particular point of contention for me. Starting with the sound design, and I mean, just listen.
As you rot for eternity in the Ghost Zone prison! When will you people learn?
The sound design is inconsistent all around. Some noises are really loud, while things like voice acting are really quiet. Speaking of the voice acting, it's pretty inconsistent. Now the quality is good. Each of the represented shows featured here have their returning voice actors, such as Tara Strong as Timmy Turner and Tom Kenny as SpongeBob. Now what I mean is the amount of voice acting is inconsistent. Some scenes feature full voice acting, but then it's just quiet text boxes for the others. I don't get it. I mean, you had the actors in the booth. Why not record the additional dialogue? Finally, in the sound department, there's the music, which is one of the main things I'm conflicted about in this game. On the one hand, it's not terrible, but do any of these tracks scream Nicktoons to you? Then there's the main menu music, which may be the most known from the game, for better or worse. Doesn't this just get you pumped to go fight bad guys? But now I think it's time to get to the gameplay, which is the part of the game I'm easily the most split on. The game is an action platformer, with each character having unique abilities that allows them to move from area to area. For example, Timmy can lift heavy things using his Clift powers, and can freeze doors and break them to move forward. While a character like Danny can phase through objects using his ghost powers, and can break certain obstacles using his ghostly wail. SpongeBob and Jimmy have special moves as well, but I feel like they get the least to do with those special moves. But here's the thing, this is the aspect of the gameplay I enjoy the most. It makes each character feel special, which is how it should be. Unfortunately, the feeling of characters being special washes away when you realize just how boring the game can be. Combat is so basic. Enemies fall in two categories. Hit them until they die, or ground pound them to get rid of their shield, and then hit them until they die. Then, there's the fact that your moving speed is extremely slow, making some levels feel much longer than they actually are. Add the sometimes sleep-inducing music and sound effects that give no satisfaction to combat, and gameplay can be a total snooze fest at times. The only two parts of the gameplay, besides the unique powers that I genuinely like, are the levels you go through and the boss fights. The levels aren't perfect, but they do a good enough job representing their respective shows, except for Retroville. I'll come back to this issue in a second, but first, let's talk about the boss fights. The boss fights are honestly quite fun. I'm actually going to go through each boss in quick succession, starting off with Walker. This fight is very simple. Hit him until he dies, while avoiding the various attacks that come your way. With Vlad, you need to drain his energy bar before you can properly attack him. You do this by having Danny take over his dad's body, which allows him to drain Vlad's energy bar. Plankton is largely the same, with you just needing to hit his weak spot to drain his energy bar. Then, you can proceed to beat the crap out of him. Crocker changes things up a bit though. You need to drain his health bar first, and then the generators on the big wand will become vulnerable to destroy. You need to do this for the 3 different floors of the big wand. The Fleabot sucks though. This stupid robot is apparently the representative for Jimmy Neutron. And again, he sucks. You just hit him until he dies, like the very first boss of the game. Occasionally you hit the gong on the side of the arena to get him down, but this fight is just boring. The final boss isn't any better. You fight all 4 villains at once, and need to lower their shields in order to do damage to each individual villain. This is a cool idea and concept, but the execution is just not that good. But my biggest complaint with the bosses is the fact that Professor Calamitous doesn't get a solo boss fight. If every other villain can get one, why can Calamitous not get one? Heck, why does Jimmy get no representation? The only location from the show that's recognizable is his lab. The Goddard level could be any factory from any of the shows, frankly. And the final boss arena is again just some random factory looking place that could be from any of the shows. That Goddard level also highlights another major problem with the game, the lives system. You see, your entire team shares lives, meaning if a party member goes down, that's 1 less life from your stockpile. It's just a bad idea, and frankly, I don't know what the developers were thinking. Actually, that's a statement that kinda sums up my frustrations with this whole game. It's a shame, as I think the concept of the game itself is still solid, but ultimately, Nicktoons Unite is a game that squanders its unique and fun premise. While the character interactions are great, the awful cutscenes, boring gameplay, and sleep-inducing soundtrack hold the game back for me. While I have some nostalgia for the game, Nicktoons Unite is sadly not a game I'll be returning to anytime soon. Nicktoons Battle for Volcano Island is a very interesting sequel. It takes 2, maybe even 3 steps forward, while still taking some steps backwards. Now before we get to the aspects of the game that move it forward from the original, I want to talk about the aspects that hold it back. This is because while I really like this game, there are some factors that hold it back, and I want to get those out of the way. The first of those topics being the unique character interactions, and how they are a step back compared to the original game. While there are still some neat interactions between characters, there is less than the original game. This might be down to the lack of character variety this time around. You see, while there might be more playable characters this time, with 6 instead of the original game's 4, with 3 SpongeBob characters, 2 Danny Phantom characters, and then Timmy from Fairly Odd Parents, the character selection you are mostly left with is characters interacting with people they already know. If I wanted SpongeBob to interact with other SpongeBob characters, I'd play his games or watch his show, compared to the original game, where it was nicely divided, so every time someone was talking, it was a conversation you had to play the game to get. Here, you just don't get that as much. Now the second aspect I want to touch on is that now, every character plays exactly the same. They can all jump and double jump, shoot a ranged attack, and do a melee combo. As far as I could tell, the only other action available is the Sam from Danny Phantom. You can pick up a Fenton thermos, which will allow her to put on the Fenton armor, which she had in the opening cutscene. None of the other characters can use this ability. This takes away one of the best parts about the original, which is that every character was important to the game. There would be certain obstacles that only Jimmy could get past, and the same thing goes for Timmy, Danny, and SpongeBob. Every character was required to finish the game, which made it super special. But again, that's all gone here. There's no unique obstacles that only one character can help with. It makes the characters feel less special, because anything that SpongeBob can do, Danny can also do now, which is not how it should be to me. Those are the two main things that bug me about this game, because with the quality being so low in the original game, it was easy to latch onto those things that really stood out. So it's kinda disappointing to see those qualities absent in the sequel. Some other nitpicks include Jimmy once again being shafted by not even being playable this time, which is weird, since in the concept art, it shows the original 4 on the island together, which means at some point, he was probably going to be playable. So it's weird that they cut him out and chose our current playable roster. There's also Timmy, who, while he might be playable, he is easily the worst character in the game, since his attack speed is slower than the other characters, and his ranged attack comes from Wanda, who flies behind him. This makes it hard to judge where his ranged attack will come from. Speaking of those new ranged attacks, they're completely useless. You can only get them from the orange crystals. They do pitiful damage to anything other than the most basic enemies, and they are extremely limited. Again, they are just useless. Lastly, some of the cutscenes are out of sync, with some being more noticeable than others.
You bugs better give up! King Gorge will crush yous all!
Don't you see, Sergeant? You have been affected by the Mongoose ooze. You must resist, or we are all doomed.
Ah, shut up! Soon you'll be one of us, a loyal servant of the Magu. One of us, one of us, one of us.
Here she is, and it looks like she's running out of time. Let's move.
One of us, one of... Huh? Oh, okay.
Alright, that's all the negatives out of the way. I wanted to get those done because I feel that they are problems that need to be acknowledged when talking about the game. But now, I could talk about how even with those faults, I love this game. The biggest thing to talk about is how much better the game feels to play this time around. Every action your character can do feels responsive and fun to pull off. Platforming in particular is leagues better than in the original. There you couldn't even double jump, but here you can, and it feels much better for it. The final level is pretty much just one long platforming challenge, and it's one of my favorite levels in the game. Then, there's the combat, which is much faster this time around. Granted, it's way easier, but still. After the snail's pace combat from the original, speeding it up was, in my opinion, the right call. About the only thing that wasn't improved about the combat was the bosses. They're not bad and still enjoyable, but they lose the challenge and the puzzle factor of those original bosses. However, there is a new type of boss that I quite like. We're gonna call these guys the slingshot bosses. In these, you fight these giant-sized bosses, and you fight them using slingshots. In the first one, you have to destroy the shield on the back of this sand monster. Then, you need to shoot him in the face enough for him to stumble in the waterfall. In the second one, you just shoot the boss. A bit more simple, but I still like it. Here's why. The scale of these bosses makes them feel like an event. Compare the simple fighting bosses to these bosses. These guys are huge! It means that even with the easy difficulty, these guys are still fun to fight, because again, they feel like a major event. The last thing to mention on the gameplay side is that now there is a hub world. In between levels, you have a little area that you walk around and do various things, such as replay levels and see the stuff you've unlocked. Oh, that's right, there's unlockables in the game. You find various collectibles throughout the levels, and if you collect enough, you unlock some really cool extras, like alternate character costumes, concept art, and even some bonus time travel levels for each character. Now that's all I got for the gameplay. I want to talk about how the presentation of the game has dramatically improved from the original. Character models are way more appealing, and to go with that, the cutscenes are a lot more enjoyable to watch. Now again, there are some sound issues in certain cutscenes, but that still does not diminish the overall enjoyment of them. What especially helps with the overall enjoyment is the inclusion of Patrick.
Patrick! What are you doing here?
Jumping, SpongeBob! Jumping!
Patrick, we're the chosen ones, and we're on a mission to save the world!
Hooray!
Patrick, are you coming with us?
Oh! Okay.
Including Patrick in almost anything really is bound to bring more entertainment. I want to also point out the improved animations that can be seen in the cutscenes, especially when compared to the repeated and stilted animations of the original game.
That sounds like
It wasn't me!
Squidward!
Oh, great. Rescued by SpongeBob.
Moving on, I want to talk about the environments. I love how the environments look in this game. They start out fairly normal, with a beach and then a crashed ship setting, but by the end, we run into factory settings and a tornado with bits and pieces from everyone's home dimensions flying in the background. I love the otherworldly look that the late game environments have. Makes it seem like this place is truly unlike anything else these characters have seen. Now before we move on to the story, I want to talk about the music, which in my opinion, might be the biggest improvement from the original to this. Before, you had elevator music. Now, we have this. Two things to note about the music. One, it finally makes you feel like you're on an adventure, which is something the first game struggled with. Second, I love how since this is mostly a tropical place, most of the music has a tropical sound to it. Now, with that out of the way, let's get to the story. The story follows our Nicktoons being summoned to the Volcano Island to defeat the evil Magu. I'm not kidding when I say that's all you really need to know to get the basic understanding of the story. About the only other development of the story comes after you contact Jimmy, and he explains that the Magu is stealing energy from the characters' homeworlds, basically meaning he's going to destroy the characters' homes unless they stop him. Besides that though, that's really it. The reason for this simplicity comes down to the fact that you spend most of the story just looking for the other characters to populate your party. That, along with the fact that the main villain rarely shows up on camera, leads me to say that the main story is in fact a downgrade when compared to the first game. There's just nothing to it. The first one had the novelty of these characters coming together for the first time. This game doesn't have that, and with the plot not really progressing for most of the time, it's just a lot less special because of that. Wait a minute. This is supposed to be the positive part of the video. I like the fact that SpongeBob and Danny are essentially the main characters of the story. This can mainly be inferred from the fact that they are the first two characters you play as. In the Hope world, you play as Danny and SpongeBob, and you play as these two in the final level, and I think you play as them in every single level in the game. It's just the little things that add up that make it seem like the developers wanted to focus on these two, which I am definitely okay with. If you look at the points I've made about the game, a lot of them are comparing this to the original game. But if you put the original aside and just review this game on its own merit, how does it stack up? If I'm being honest, it's okay. At the end of the day, it's still a fairly generic licensed 3D platformer. However, I don't care. I still love this game. I have many fond memories of playing this game with my brother and cousins. At the end of the day, I personally think this is the best game in the Nicktoons Unite quadrilogy. Which is bad news for me, as it can only go downhill from here. Am I exaggerating? Well, find out in my review of Nicktoons Attack of the Toybots. I should make something clear. I'm not the biggest platforming fan. I understand why people love these games. There is a thrill to going through these obstacle course-filled levels, from landing every jump to pulling off acrobatic stunts that I could only dream of pulling off in real life. But they have largely just never been for me. There is an exception to everything, though, and for platformers, some do manage to squeeze in. Why do I bring this up? Because Nicktoons Attack of the Toybots, the subject of today's video, is a straight-up platformer. For context, the first two games in this series I would describe as action games with platforming segments. But Toybots is a platformer through and through, with very small combat segments here and there. Now, this isn't a bad thing. Far from it. The platforming segments were my favorite parts of the last game. However, if my memory serves me right, I remember this being impossible for my younger self, which is why, up until this review, I had never beaten it. So as we boot up this game, I'm going in cautiously optimistic. This review is going to be structured a little bit differently compared to my other Nicktoons videos. I'm going to take you through the game almost level by level, occasionally stopping to give my thoughts now and then. The only thing I won't talk about is the story, as I'm going to save my thoughts on that for later. But with that, I say, let's begin the review. After a couple of cutscenes, we begin the game in Bikini Bottom. Right away, the game feels almost identical to Volcano Island, which is a good thing. That game did a lot to improve the overall gameplay feel of the series, so sticking with that style is a good thing in my eyes. As for this opening level, it's pretty good. It does a good job getting you used to the combat and the controls. It even introduces a welcome improvement on the last game. Instead of a range attack that's practically useless, we get a solid improvement here in Toybots. These little containers have slime in them. Running into one allows you to shoot slime repeatedly at your enemies. You have more ammo at your disposal and you have a faster rate of fire. This alone makes the ranged attack a lot more useful than it was in the last game. Other than that, the other notable thing I noticed in this first stage is a new ability that every character has access to. By pressing the R2 button, you can grab and hold on to whatever surface you're on. However, if you're moving, the character will do a roll move. It may not seem like it now, but this new move will become one of the most important abilities in the game. I'll return to that point later, but let's continue with the game for now. After completing the opening level, we move on to Factory Zone 1. The first thing to note is that we unlock more playable characters in this level. We unlock Tack, Timmy Turner, and Jimmy Neutron. That's right, we could play as Jimmy here, but not only that, Timmy doesn't suck anymore. At this point, it seemed like everything I complained about in the last game was being fixed here. But in this level, I began to see some new cons that weren't present in the last game. It can all be seen in the platforming. When you're platforming, any time you hit an obstacle, you're teleported back to the beginning of the platforming section. Now remember at the beginning of the video when I said I wasn't a big platforming guy? Yeah, this is where you're going to see this viewpoint in action. Not in Factory Zone 1, but in Zone 2 and especially Zone 3, you're going to see me failing in these levels. That being said though, one thing that Zone 1 introduces that could be described as one of the main features of this game is the master models. When progressing through the levels, you'll likely notice these weird green portals with the various characters being displayed. When you have the character that's being displayed, you jump into the portal and you'll be sucked into the tube. Doing this will take you to a special stage. In these, you'll be tasked with doing a platforming challenge. These range from fairly easy to impossible. After doing that, you're sent to the Master Model Chamber, where you beat a bunch of enemies and afterwards collect the Master Model. By the way, on a side note, I swear this room is based on Invader Zim. This logo and the color palette of the room seem straight out of Invader Zim. Now most of the characters are just given random challenges to get to the Master Model Chamber. However, 3 characters are given specific special stages that are unique to those characters. Those characters are SpongeBob, Tack, and Danny Phantom. Which is strange. I mean, I get SpongeBob since, he's SpongeBob. And Tack's show premiered the same year that this game came out. But Danny's a strange pick, considering that his show had just aired its final episode in 2007, the same year this game came out. As for the unique stages, let's talk about SpongeBob's stages first. He gets sliding levels. That should be familiar to people who played the Heavy Iron SpongeBob games. Unlike those, however, the controls are extremely slippery. Just slightly touching the control stick can send SpongeBob flying to the other side, which is very bad when you immediately restart the section after touching any obstacle. But shockingly, I still enjoy these sections. I always remember replaying the first one a lot as a kid, and even when recording this video, I found these to be a lot more enjoyable than the random platforming challenges that other characters get. But they're not my favorite of the unique challenges. That honor would go to Tack's special stages. At first, it seems like just another platforming section, until you realize that Tack has been powered up for these stages. He can jump a lot higher here, which shockingly adds a lot of fun value to these stages for me. What also adds a lot of value to these stages is that compared to the later levels of this game, I find these to be very fair. Overall, these Tack stages are super fun and are a major highlight for me. But then we get to Danny's stages, so no joke, these are some of my least favorite parts of the game. All you have to do is reach the end of this maze, but you do it while flying in Danny's weird invisible ghost form. The controls are odd for these sections. Instead of just moving with the left analog stick, it aims Danny in the direction you want to move. Then you use the right stick to move in the direction that Danny is facing. Then you shoot energy spheres to destroy any obstacles or enemies in Danny's way. These just feel very odd to control, and the sound effects are almost annoying in how overwhelming they are. I tried to avoid as many of these stages as possible, and thankfully, there are other master models you can find to where you'll hopefully be able to avoid doing the Danny stages. That's all I have to say about getting the master models. Overall, I really like this, but mainly for one reason. The fact that you need a certain character to get a certain master model brings back that feeling from the first game, of every character feeling important. I know it's not exactly the same thing, but still, every character here feels important again. I really like that feature, even though, like Volcano Island, every character plays exactly the same here. Anyway, after spending way too much time on the master model collecting, let's get back to the game and move on to Toy Factory Zone 2. This right here is where the platforming starts to become insane. Now for a platforming fan, this might not seem like such a big deal, but again, I'm not a huge platforming fan, so this stage was a real wake-up call. It's definitely when the game decides to stop holding back, in terms of the platforming challenge. Expect this level to take you a bit longer than the previous ones, but after that, upon returning to the level select screen, you'll notice that no new levels have been unlocked. That's because you need the master models. After beating a level, you go back to the previous levels to collect the master models. The reason is that you need to collect a certain amount before the next level is unlocked. Now you know why I went into depth explaining the process of getting one. One thing I did forget to mention is that thankfully you don't have to play the level all the way through to get a single model. You select certain points in the level to go through, and it'll tell you which master model you'll be getting, and what characters are needed to unlock said master model, which is nice. By the way, XJ9, Gur, Stimpy, and Rocco are all playable by finding their respective master models. They don't add anything to the story, but still, having them here is a nice inclusion. So after finding enough master models, we unlock Amity Park, which means I now have to talk about the robot levels. These play like an isometric shooter, meaning you have an upward angle of the playable character. You move using the left analog stick, and you aim and shoot using the right analog stick. The R2 button is used to shoot a special shot, and it changes for each character. That's about the only variation you'll get in these stages though. Doesn't matter which robot you get, they'll all play the same. Now there is one more thing to mention about the robot stages. They're bad. Like, really bad. They're just so boring. They go on for like 20 minutes when it feels like 40. And then there's your walking speed. You walk so slowly in these stages that it drags these levels down even more. Not to mention, the game wastes these cool looking evil Toybot designs of the main characters just to use them in these levels. You could have potentially made these into cool boss fights. But instead, this game has no boss fights. The closest thing to a boss fight in this game is the Jimmy Neutron tank at the end of Amity Park. But that's all I have to say about the robot stages. And with that, we end off Amity Park. Now on to Factory Zone 3. Or as I like to call it, my personal torment. Yeah, I failed a lot at this stage. Now remember earlier in the video when I mentioned this grab/roll move and how important it would become? This is where that statement comes to fruition. A lot of obstacles will not stop moving, and will require you to hold on in order to not fall off the obstacle. It was at this point in the game that I began to dread playing it. Zone 3 was just so difficult. If you are good at the game, it should take close to an hour to complete. But for me, it felt like 4 hours. And the same thing goes for Fairy World, which again is another platforming stage, and like Zone 3, it's insanely hard. I just kept dying over and over again, to the point of exhaustion. By the time I got to this stage, I was just ready for the game to be over. I don't have much to say about the next stage, which is just another dumb robot level. And with that, we've reached the end of the gameplay section. Overall, gameplay-wise, I'm not the biggest fan of the game. It all goes back to the beginning of the video when I said I'm not the biggest platforming fan. To some people that seems like a dumb point to keep bringing up, but I can't stress enough how different this game feels to go through than the previous games. Because of that, I find myself feeling rather meh about the whole game. It has qualities I still like, but in the end, I just don't see myself coming back to this, like I do Volcano Island. But before anyone asks if the story makes up for anything, let me just stop you there. No. In fact, so far, this is my least favorite story in the series. In simplest terms, the story has our Nickelodeon characters teaming up to shut down Professor Calamitus's evil toy factory. I like the idea and concept, because Calamitous wasn't given much attention in the original game. In execution, though, it falls apart. For one, his master plan is kind of stupid. He's feeding fairies Krabby Patties so that they fart magical gas. No, I'm not joking about that. Which will help in creating his evil toys. Then, he powers them using ghost energy. He then starts kidnapping our heroes to clone them and makes evil toy versions of them. This is why early in the game we find Tack, Timmy, and Jimmy trapped in the factory. Now besides that, there's not much story here. This opening cutscene that plays right before you go to the main menu is the most story you get in the whole game. The rest of the cutscenes are very short and barely add any story to the whole game. What they do add are some nice interactions between the characters. While not as good as the first game, there is more than Volcano Island, so it's appreciated. But there's just not enough. Volcano Island was simple too, but I always felt like there were enough cutscenes to keep adding to the story. Here, there just isn't enough. And then, there's the ending. So after finishing Calamitous' lab, our characters seemingly make their way to the Biggest Genius Award show, which is the location from the intro of the game. Then, it seems like Calamitous is going to win the award. But, Chadbot wins! Forgot to mention him, but he was allowing us access through the factory in exchange for collecting the master models. How did Chadbot win this award? Apparently by using the theme ingredients? What? I really don't know at this point. Then Chadbot shaves Calamitous' mustache. Then it's game over. What did I just experience? What was the point of this whole game show? Why couldn't Calamitous just be trying to pull off an evil scheme? How was he able to finish this plan when his whole personality in his show is him not being able to finish anything? Why are Plankton and the Magu from Volcano Island there in the beginning if you're not going to use them? It makes me upset because I feel like there was an opportunity here to make something special, but they dropped the ball hard with this game. Now, am I being too harsh on the story? Probably. I mean, it's simple, but it gets the job done. I just think that ultimately as I get older, I guess I want more out of the games I play. Jeez Louise. A 24-year-old complaining that a story in a Nickelodeon game is too simple. What am I doing with my life? I wish I could say something more positive about this game, but I just don't care for it that much. While the gameplay is still fun, the platforming is just frustrating here. And there's not enough story to make it compelling either. Overall, Nicktoons Attack the Toybots is a massive step down from Volcano Island. We have finally reached the fourth and final game in the Nicktoons Unite saga, and we're starting off this review with a major shakeup. Blue Tongue Entertainment, who developed the last 3 games, did not return to develop the 4th entry. They were most likely busy with their new original game, The Blob. So the 4th Nicktoons title would be developed by Incinerator Studios, who had only worked on racing games before this. Now, not that the last 3 games were masterpieces, but switching developers at the 4th game is a little weird. Speaking of weird, let's talk about that title. SpongeBob SquarePants, featuring Nicktoons, Globs of Doom. Now, coming off of the last 3 games, this may seem a bit strange, unless you lived outside of North America. You see, outside of North America, the series has had the title of SpongeBob and Friends. This seems like a marketing tactic, as SpongeBob does seem like the more marketable character out of the group. It must not have helped enough though, seeing as this is the final game in the series. While there would be more crossover games after this, there weren't any others that connected to this series. Is it because this game was a disaster, or was this a natural place to end the series? Let's find out. We begin the game in Bikini Bottom, where SpongeBob's walk to work is interrupted when the population gets hit with this weird orange goop. Before anything can really develop, Jimmy Neutron shows up and tells SpongeBob and Patrick to come with him. They do, and they end up back on Volcano Island. with Danny and Tack showing up and saying that their worlds are also being invaded by the orange goo. But they're not alone, as villains from their worlds show up saying they need to team up.
All of us are threatened.
Technus. Beautiful, gorgeous.
Traylock. Langton?
Yes, you know us.
Okay, let's be civil. I invited the evil syndicate here for a reason.
But they're evil.
How could you be so sure the evil syndicate are evil?
I'd say the evil part of the name's a dead giveaway.
All our homes are threatened. The only way to defeat this enemy is to join forces.
Now, they decide to team up and defeat this alien threat together. Before we can get deeper into the game, I want to discuss two things from the opening. First thing being these character models, because these models are horrible. They look almost like action figures brought to life in horrifying detail. Patrick's close-up here especially highlights the awful looking models. They look so bad. Jimmy's eyebrows look like pickles. Danny's eyebrows are just rectangles. In my opinion, the worst looking characters by far are Jimmy, Danny, Traylock, or Traylock, whatever he's called, and Technus. Speaking of those last two characters, here's the second thing I wanted to discuss: the playable roster. So the big gimmick, or attraction of this game, is that you get to play as both the heroes and the villains. The playable heroes include SpongeBob, Jimmy Neutron, Danny Phantom, Tack, and Invader Zim. We'll come back to that later. The playable villains include Plankton, Beautiful Gorgeous, Technus, Traylock, and Dib. This is an extremely odd cast of characters. For one, this is the first game in the series not to feature Timmy Turner. It's strange because Fairly Odd Parents was still in the air when this game came out. The only reason I can possibly see for him not being here is because apparently there are some issues when it comes to the TV show rights, with Nickelodeon supposedly only owning the rights in North America. Again, take this with a grain of salt. No one has ever confirmed the reason why he isn't here. But Timmy isn't the biggest problem with the cast. To me, almost none of the villains make sense for this game. Plankton is the only one that makes sense, because everyone knows him. But Beautiful Gorgeous, Technus, and Traylock are some borderline deep cuts. Then, there's the Invader Zim characters. Now, while I love their inclusion in the game, I don't really understand the switch up here. For some reason, Zim is on the hero's side, while Dib teams up with the villains. It's a pretty strange decision, which this game is seemingly full of. Now, fun fact, we're almost 700 words into this video, and I haven't even mentioned the gameplay yet. So let's change that. Now, unfortunately, I don't have too much to say about the gameplay. It plays a lot like Battle for Volcano Island. Linear levels with some basic platforming and basic combat thrown throughout. One of the few changes from Volcano Island is in the ranged attack. All it does in this game is allow you to put the enemy in a state where you can kill them instantly. All of the characters have their own variations of the ranged attack, but the results are the same. The only other thing I can think of that's new are the team-up attacks. Each level, as far as I can remember, has a unique pair of 2 characters for each level, and each pair has their own unique team-up attacks. The results are about the same as the normal ranged attack, except now, a group of enemies can be insta-killed after the attack. But that's literally it as far as new gameplay additions go for the game. Yep, we're already done with new things added to the gameplay. Literally, the only interesting part left to talk about in the game are the boss fights. Oh, my mistake. I said the interesting part, when I should have said the boring part, because these boss fights aren't that good. Bubble Bass is the first boss fight, and you throw Krabby Patties into his mouth to beat him. No joke, I think I beat this guy in less than 5 minutes. Then there's Gurr, who you just need to cross his line of doom, then wait for an opening to hit him. Ghost Dog is slightly more interesting, requiring you to activate the lasers in the room and have him run into them. It's more creative than just hitting him, but it's also not that fun. Then there's the girl-eating plant in Retroville. It's very similar to Gurr, in that you have to get past the opening section and then find an opening to hit it. Then, there's Globulus Maximus, who you fight in space with a giant robot. You just need to destroy the shields defending him and then go in for the kill. Repeat until he's defeated. But that's actually not the final boss. The final boss is the robot you piloted in that last fight. You play as Globulus Maximus in this fight, and unfortunately, this might be the second easiest fight in the game, only beaten by Bubble Bass from the beginning of the game. Now, if I had to pick one boss from the game that's my favorite, it'd actually be this fight. The reason I like this one the most is because this one actually has an alternate ending if you lose the fight. I discovered this after looking up some stuff about the game on YouTube, simply because this fight is so easy that I never lost to it and got to see the alternate ending. But even with that cool feature, the ending still isn't that great. All it shows is the villains trapping Globulus and thinking of some ways to use his powers for evil purposes. But again, the fight is so easy you'll likely never see it unless you intentionally lose. So that's it for the gameplay. I'll discuss my actual thoughts about it later on, but for now, I want to discuss environments. You actually get to visit the homes of every character. I know Toybots did technically have Bikini Bottom, Amity Park, and Fairy World levels, but those felt unrecognizable from their TV shows. But here, levels actually look like they're from the shows. So getting to explore these places really adds some fun to the game. The scale of the levels feel huge. You see a lot of iconic parts of SpongeBob's world here. Scaling the buildings in Amity Park adds a lot to that place. But most importantly, Jimmy finally gets representation by having levels take place in Retroville. It only took 4 games, but it's here now, which is nice. Believe it or not, the worlds/levels are actually one of, if not my favorite parts of the game. Each world feels fully realized here, especially Zim and Danny's worlds, since they never got a console game where you can explore their respective homes. So the game feels special for that reason. But that's about the only thing that makes the game feel truly special. A lot of the other aspects hold it back from anything being worth going back to. One of those aspects being the story, which we should really get back to. I'm gonna be honest, writing this part of the script has been kind of hard. Mostly because this story is nothing really special. Throughout the game, you begin collecting pieces of Magoo technology in order to power a robot for the final boss. While this is happening, SpongeBob begins to absorb some of the goo throughout the story. This allows the villain of the game, Globulus Maximus, to begin communicating through SpongeBob. The only thing that really comes from this is that Globulus decides he wants to take on the form of SpongeBob. After that, our group go to fight Globulus, and upon defeating him, the villains decide to betray us. Because of course they do. Globulus then reveals he's a space booger, and... I'm sorry, what?
I was created along with the beginning of the universe.
You mean during the Big Bang?
No, during the big sneeze.
You mean you're not evil then? You're a giant booger?
I'll come back to this later. Then Globulus transforms into a giant SpongeBob, beats the bad guys, and then drops the heroes back off at Volcano Island. Once he leaves, we get this truly wonderful ending.
Goodbye.
If he was born a giant booger, that means something with a nose that big created him. And think how big you'd have to be to have that big a nose!
Old Hermit Crab, we couldn't have done it without you. We owe you a big
Hey, you think this is just like when time began? You know, like the beginning? Early on?
No, Patrick! Feels more like the end.
This is how the series ends. 4 games in, and it ends like this. Now look, this story isn't terrible. There are some parts I like. In particular, I find that the interactions between characters is better here than in Toybots.
Don't be so one-eyed about it. The Magu enhancement means that you've got something you always wanted.
But this isn't the Krabby Patty secret recipe!
No, size!
Yes! Now I can crush my enemies and take over the world! Hey, what gives?
My juju powers are telling me something.
That you're not wearing a shirt?
That thing in the dog's mouth is the missing piece we need. Come on!
There is no way I'm wiping off the drool. What? You live here? It beats living in a bucket.
Come on, we gotta find your Bulba.
Jib, who, what?
My mentor. He may know where the piece is hidden.
May the juju be with you.
Granted, it still isn't on the same level as the first game. Ultimately, though, the interactions aren't enough to save the story and the game itself. In fact, if you asked me to describe the game in one word, it'd be boring. The gameplay is just a repeat of Volcano Island, while the story itself is really just uninteresting. Honestly, it's the strange stuff that interests me. Like, why is half the roster from shows that were cancelled? Who thought these character models would appeal to anyone? Lastly, who thought that fighting a space booger was a good idea? Actually, let me talk about this for a second. The first game featured a team of the greatest villains for you to fight. The second featured a new threat that threatened every single character's world. Game 3 had you stopping a villain from Game 1 from winning an award, I guess? Honestly, I didn't care for that much. But that game, and especially the games beforehand, had a much better setup and payoff than fighting a space booger. Maybe I'm making a bigger deal of this than anyone else would. These games are made for 6 to 8 year olds. And I'm 25. But these games were the first to essentially introduce the idea of crossovers to me. When I was younger, these were like the coolest things ever to me. So now looking at these games as an adult, and realizing that this is how it ended, with a game that on a good day is only a 6 out of 10, is rather disappointing to me. So ultimately, Nicktoons Globs of Doom is a disappointing end to this series of games. In fact, this was the last game to feature Nickelodeon characters crossing over with one another in a story mode until 2023, with the release of Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2. It is such an occasion to me that I've decided to end this marathon by taking a look at the story mode of this game to end the series. Now let me put some disclaimers up first. 1, I'm not reviewing the game as a whole. I'm specifically looking at the story mode only. 2, I didn't play through the whole story. I only played around an hour of it, just to get an idea of what it was like. 3, Nick All-Star Brawl 2 is a platform fighter, like Super Smash Bros., meaning your primary goal is to get your opponent's percentage high enough to where they can essentially be knocked off the stage. I explain this for 2 reasons. 1, so you can understand the basics of the actual gameplay. And 2, because I am awful at these games. So when you see the footage in the background, you'll notice that I'm not very good. With that out of the way, let's actually look at the story. The premise is great. It sees Vlad from Danny Phantom trying to conquer all of the worlds. So Clockwork, also from Danny Phantom, saves SpongeBob, who begins a journey to defeat Vlad. You go through stage to stage and do a variety of things. You can have a one-on-one fight, go through an obstacle course, or fight a group of enemies. Occasionally, you get to stop and get upgrades from different characters. Eventually, you end a section by fighting a boss battle, and these are actually quite fun. But I've neglected to mention one of the most important aspects of the story mode. It's a roguelike, which can be somewhat difficult to explain, so let me try my best to explain it real quick. In a roguelike, you start out at a hub world. In the hub world, you meet characters and buy permanent upgrades. When you're ready, you begin a level and start what is called a run. In the run, you play the game as normal, but any upgrades you find along the way aren't permanent upgrades like in the hub. The reason I bring this up is because if you lose or die during your run, you lose any upgrades you picked up during the run. Also, upon losing, you're sent back to the hub world and have to restart the area you were in from the beginning. The setup I just explained is almost the exact setup for the story mode here in this game. But it's because of that setup that I honestly found myself lukewarm on the whole story mode here. I'm just not that big a fan of roguelikes, which is ultimately what brings the story down for me. That, and the fact that I'm not the biggest fan of the platform fighter genre. However, it's still a fun game to play, and I just enjoy the fact that we have a new game where Nickelodeon characters can cross over with a story to go with it. So thankfully, this marathon doesn't end on a whimper with Globs of Doom. Now normally, at the end of a series, I'd rank all the games in the series, but for this one, I'm not going to do that, because ultimately, I really enjoyed only one game in the series, Volcano Island. It's the one I'd go back to again out of the whole series. It's unfortunate, because as a kid, I loved these games, even if I couldn't beat them. But as an adult, this is just how I feel. With that, we have finally reviewed all of the games in the Nicktoons Unite series, and it only took almost 2 years!